Welcome to the Educator Stable with Camaria. Today I'm doing a reflection on a particular article about education and recovery. On December 9th, 2025, I read an editorial published by the Gleaner titled "A Carve-Out for Education." And the article discusses Jamaica's recovery after Hurricane Melissa and argues that education should receive special priority in the national rebuilding effort. And as I reflected on this article, I found myself thinking carefully about both the strength of the argument and also the questions it raises. Now, the editorial strongly suggests that education should not be treated as just another sector in the recovery process. According to the article, if schools remain damaged or closed for too long, students could experience severe learning loss, right? Dropped out rates may increase, and the country could risk what some describe as a lost generation. Wow. So, with that said and done, a lost generation, when I read this point, it seemed very persuasive because education is often seen as the foundation for national development and human capital. Follow me through. However, as I reflected more deeply, I realized that the argument also carries a strong emotional appeal. It almost implies that if education is not prioritized above other sectors, Jamaica's future development may be severely threatened. And this made me wonder whether the article relies partly on what scholars might call an appeal to fear or a persuasive strategy that emphasize possible negative consequences to strengthen an argument. The editorial also places the hurricane's economic damage into perspective by comparing it with the cost of the financial sector secured during the FINSAC financial sector crisis. And the article notes that the economic loss from the hurricane could reach about 75% of Jamaica's GDP, which is far greater than the financial intervention during that early crisis. While the comparison is interesting, I wonder whether it might represent a false equivalence, because financial crisis and national disaster affect a country in different ways and may require different recovery strategies. One of the central proposals in the editorial is the creation of a school education recovery and resilience fund, right? SERRF. And the article suggests that this fund could focus specifically on rebuilding schools, repairing infrastructures, and supporting learning recovery. It also mentions that institutions such as the National Education Trust and the Jamaica Social Investment Fund could play an important role in helping to mobilize resources and manage recovery efforts. While this idea seems practical, it also made me reflect on another question. If education receives a protected fund, Should other sectors receive the same treatment? Health services, transportation systems, housing, utilities were affected by the hurricane. If each sector asks for its own carve-out, the process of national prioritization becomes much more would become much more complicated, right? And this thought led me to consider whether the argument might also resemble what some thinkers described as special pleading, where one issue is presented as deserving exceptional attention without applying the same standard to others. The article also encourages Jamaica to rethink education during the recovery process. It recommends stronger teacher training, trauma-informed teaching approaches, digital learning systems, and the integration of climate resilience into the curriculum. I found these ideas inspiring, but I also question whether major educational reforms are always realistic during a national crisis. Sometimes recovery efforts focus on immediate rebuilding rather than long-term transformation. Overall, reading the editorial from the Gleaner encouraged me to think about the complexity of national recovery. The article presents a strong argument for prioritized education, and there is certainly truth in the idea that education shapes the country's long-term development. At the same time, rebuilding a nation after a disaster requires balancing many urgent needs. From my reflection, I do not see the issue as choosing one side over another. Instead, I see it as part of a broader national conversation about priorities, resources, and the kind of future Jamaica wants to build. The real challenge may not simply be deciding whether education deserves a carve-out, but funding a balanced approach that strengthens the entire society while protecting the learning and development of its people. Another discussion / reflection from the Educator's table with Camaria.